好，不好意思，就是让大家久等了。那么今天是我们这个走马舵国际社会主义前进系列讲座的第2场，讨论的是这个世界展望跟世界局势的部分。那一样我们会邀请到就是由希腊的开始国际社会主义组织的这个很有经验的这个左翼的成员 Andrews 来为我们做一个就是主讲的部分。那主讲结束以后，我们预计会休息5到10分钟的时间，然后让大家去上个厕所，准备稍后的讨论跟发言。接着我们就会进入到 Q&A 的部分。那在 Q&A 结束以后，我们在5点的时候会休息，5点到6点会休息1个小时的时间，然后接下来会进入到就是今天讲座的最后一个场次的部分。那就希望说大家就是在这个时间也就是离开，还有不要跑太远。回来还可以继续来参加我们下一场的这个最后一场的讲座。那我们就把时间交给 Andrews。
Comrades, I want to start by thanking the comrades in Taiwan for the invitation.
各位同志，我首先想要感谢台湾的同志邀请我们。
For the great hospitality that they are offering us.
并且感谢你们展现的这个宾组织。
And stress, like I learned yesterday, that we are very glad to be here.
就像lãnh đạo昨天说的，我们很高兴能够在这里。
I want to start by saying that the capitalist system on a global scale is faced with one of the worst crisis in history.
首先，我们开头要先说，我们认为资本主义在全球范围内正在面临它最大的一个挑战。
Some sections of the planet, some countries like Taiwan, they have not felt the impact of the economic crisis of the global capitalist system.
那世界上的一些国家，例如台湾，并没有同等的程度感受到这个经济危机的部分。
But they have felt other aspects of the crisis, like, for example, the geopolitical aspects.
但是台湾在其他的一些部分也确实感受到了这部分的危机，例如在这个地缘政治的这个冲突当中
，which is reflected in the war in Ukraine.
这例如包括了乌克兰战争
and the major tensions between the United States and China over Taiwan.
还包括中美在台湾上面的这个冲突。
The crisis of the capitalist system internationally is so deep that the commentators of the system, the strategists of capital, they felt the need to discover a new word to describe it.
目前的这种危机呢，深刻的程度已经到了说，这个资产阶级本身的他们自己的这些分析师，还有这个策略专家，他们都认为需要用新的一个词来描述当下的时代。
So they use the term polycrisis, which means the crisis on multiple levels.
所以他们发明了一个词叫 polycrisis， 就是说多重危机。
So the crisis is economic, it's social, it's political.
这样的危机呢，包括了经济的危机、社会的危机，还有政治的危机。
It's geopolitical and it's environmental.
包括了这个地缘政治上的危机以及环境的危机。
And this generalized crisis or polycrisis is not something temporary. It's not something cyclical.
这些所谓的多种危机呢，它并不是暂时性，不是一个就是说循环性。
Capitalism finds itself in an epoch of crisis.
而相反的，这个资本主义目前在当前的时代，它就是陷入一个长期的持续性的危机当中。
And the strategists of capital, they really don't know how to get out of it.
而这个资产阶级他们自己的这些策略的专家来说，他们自己也不知道怎么从这个危机当中脱身。
For example, they have no economic policy to help them get out of the present economic crisis, which is the root of all problems, of course.
例如呢，他们对于当下的经济危机就没有非常好的方法来解决。
In their attempt to ameliorate the problems in the world economy in the past 15 years, the capitalists have followed policies, which have as a result to bring the global debt of the global economy into unprecedented levels.
在过去15年，这些资产阶级他们想要解决世界的经济危机的方法，导致了各国的这个债务扩增到了前所未有的历史前所未有的水准。
So the global debt today is about 300 times the global GDP.
我们现在全世界的这些国家，他们的国债如果全部加总起来，是他们的 GDP 的加总的这个300倍。
This happens for the first time in the history of capitalism to have such a high degree of debt.
拥有这么高的这个程度的债务呢，在资本主义的历史上是前所未有的。
The public debt in the industrial countries, the rich countries of the planet, is around 100% of the GDP.
很多的这些比较先进的工业国家呢，他们的债务就相当于他们的 GDP， 跟他们的 GDP 相等。
And actually, one of the worst public debts is in the United States, where it's in the region, actually it's more than 130% of the GDP.
而美国其实是在当中比较严重的情况，他们的公债加总起来是大概是他们的 GDP 的1.3倍。
I don't know how many comrades have some basic understanding of economics, but I think everybody can understand that nobody can live with borrowed money forever.
我不知道大家对于这个经济的理论有多大了解，但我想大家应该都会同意，就是说，你不可能永远的用这个债务，你不可能永远的用债的方式去。
The fact that there is such a huge amount of public but also private debt means that it acts as a brake on the ability of the global economy to grow and develop.
这些庞大的包括公债还有私债，让对于全球经济的影响是造成说这个经济发展会陷入这个缓慢。
Today we see this problem reflected on the rise of inflation on an international scale.
那今天我们看到的这个它表现为的形式，就是全球范围内的这个通货膨胀的严重增长。
This is not affecting Asia so much, but it's affecting the rest of the planet.
这个通货膨胀的问题呢，在亚洲的情况不明显，但是在全球其他地方都非常的明显。
The capitalist governments have thought that they found a way to go away with inflation something like 4 decades ago, but suddenly this problem has re-emerged.
大概40年前呢，很多的资产阶级政府认为说，他们已经成功的可以控制这种通货膨胀问题，但突然间这个通货膨胀问题又席卷了，就是说卷土重来，变成了一个大的问题。
Inflation means that prices are rising very fast every year.
那么通货膨胀的实际的意思就是说，物品的物价会非常的这个增大。
And this has two effects.
然后会有2种效果。
One of them is that it stabilizes the capitalist system.
第一点是它会导致这个投资市场非常的不稳。
And the other, of course, which is more important from our point of view, is that it erodes the standard of living of the working people and the popular masses.
第二点更为重要的，对我们而言更为重要的，则是说我们的生活的条件会急剧的这个下降。
The capitalist system has only one way to solve problems like the ones I have mentioned, and this is to apply austerity policies.
资本主义政府对于这种通货膨胀危机，他们拥有的这个对策，通常只有一种方法，那就是使用分解式政策。
In other words, to attack the living standards of the working people, to attack more the public sector in the sense of destroying public utilities, public services, privatizing them, selling everything to private capital, etc.
那么具体的做法通常就是说，他们会去降低各种各样的这个生活标准，然后会把各种各样本来是公利或者说公众服务的这些东西，把它私有化，然后把它变卖给私人企业。
As a result of this, the capitalist system on a global basis has no future for the working masses and working people.
因此呢，我们看到现在的资本主义它的前景对我们工人阶级来说是非常暗淡。
In the industrially developed countries, the rich countries, we see rising unemployment and falling living standards and wages.
在很多的工业国家，我们看到这个失业率正在增长，然后他们的这个生活的条件正在下降。
We see attacks on education, on health, etc.
我看到对于这个教育还有医疗方面的这些福利，很多都被削减。
In the poor countries, which is usually called third world, we see that there are nearly 1 billion people who go to bed every night without sufficient food. They go hungry every day. 1 billion people.
在很多的那个穷国，或者说常见我们所说的第三世界国家呢，有将近1000万的人口呢，他们这个每天睡觉的时候是吃不饱肚子。
And again, on a global scale, we have 2.5 billion people who have no proper clean water on a daily basis and no sanitary basic needs are satisfied.
然后在全球范围内有大概250万人，他们的这个没有得到干净的水。
And of course, we see also political phenomena like religious fanaticism rising. We see civil wars. We see wars like the one in Ukraine, but it's not the only one. We see military coups in a number of countries, like we had very recently in Niger.
我们还看到在很多国家发生的这种有宗教的极端势力的兴起，有内战，有战争。不过战争是最明显的一个，但它并不是世界上最唯一的战争。还有例如某些国家，例如说太极，不是太极里啊，尼日发生的这个武装政变。
And we see the rise of authoritarian right-wing regimes and also the increase of the strength of the far right, particularly in Europe.
我们还看到很多国家的威权右翼的兴起，包括在很多的这个欧洲国家极右派的兴起。
We should remember that Europe was the basis for the industrialization of the planet, and it's considered to be having strong parliamentary democracies with long roots in social development.
必须回想起欧洲呢，一般来说是被认为是世界工业化的起点，同时它也被认为普遍的大家都会认为说欧洲的国家具有很强的这种议会性民主的传统，所以应该是比较民主的。
The official estimates of international agencies like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, etc., they say that the 2020s, the present decade, as regards economic growth, is going to be the worst decade since the Second World War.
很多的经济国际组织，例如说国际货币基金会，他们统计说，或者说他们预测说，在接下来的这个10年的经济的成长将是历史上最差的10年。
But many of such capitalist institutions, they accept that the next 50 years will be even worse than the present decade.
但接下来很多有其他的组织又预测说，接下来的50年还会比现在更糟。
And this establishes the fact that capitalism is in a long-term decline.
这个告诉我们的就是说，资本主义它现在正在进入一个不可避免的长期的衰退期。
This, of course, has an impact on society, and it creates struggles on the part of workers, the poor, and the youth for their rights.
这会导致很多的情况。那么其中一种情况就是说，很多的国家会有工人还有贫民，就是说这种贫穷的人民出来争取自己的权利。
In the past year, we have seen huge movements of resistance, very determined, sometimes with revolutionary characteristics in neo-colonial countries, that's the third world countries, but also in industrially developed rich countries.
那么在过去几年里，我们就看到在不同的所谓的新殖民 新殖民国家里面，比如说所谓的第三世界国家，但是也包括很多的先进工业国家里面发生了很大的一些群众运动。那么这些群众运动有些甚至还具有革命的性质。
For example, in the last 12 months, we have very big general strikes in countries like Belgium and Greece.
例如在过去12个月里面，过去1年里面，我们看到在比利时还有在这个希腊都发生了巨大的罢工。
We got very important strike movements in Germany, which is the fourth biggest economic power on the planet, but which is going downwards.
在德国也发生了很大的这个罢工情况。那么德国是全世界第4大的这个经济体，但是目前这个罢工的但是德国目前是在当然是在逐渐比不上其他的国家。
We had huge struggles in France, defending the age of pensions, which inspired the whole of Europe and I believe many people internationally.
还有法国的这个针对退休金的这个巨大的罢工和抗议。那么这个运动呢，它怎么说？它散播到了整个欧洲，同时也启发了全世界的各国的人民。
And we've got a very big and continuing wave of strikes in Britain, the biggest in the last 40 years.
同时，在英国呢，也有过去40年来最长的、持久的一系列罢工。
In the poor countries, we had a chain of revolts in the previous years.
在很多的这些比较贫穷的国家里面，我们也看到了大量的这个暴乱起义。
From 2019, there has been no section, no continent of the planet which has not been affected by very big mass movements, revolts, and as I said before, in some cases, revolutionary developments.
例如在2019年，全世界各地都发生了或大或小的这种起义事件，那么很多甚至具有所谓的像我们之前说的具有革命的性质。
I'm sure you are all quite aware, for example, of the big movement for democracy in Hong Kong in 2019.
例如，大家一定都很清楚这个香港2019年的这个运动。
But also in the previous years, we had revolutionary developments in Chile.
但是同时在那一年呢，也有发生了这个在智利发生了巨大的这个抗争。
Ecuador, Lebanon, Iraq.
还有厄瓜多尔，还有这个伊拉克，黎巴嫩、
Sudan, Sri Lanka,
苏丹跟斯里兰卡。
and more recently, a really heroic revolt of the youth and the women in Iran.
还有非常最近的这个在伊朗发生的女性的非常的英勇的这个抗争。
In 2019, we had eruptions in 35 countries around the globe.
那么2019年呢，全世界有大概35个国家发生的这个大型起义。
And it is estimated that the dimensions of these movements of 2019 was bigger even than 1968.
有人统计说，这个2019年发生的这些起义，如果把它全部都算起来的话，它的这个规模甚至可能超过了1968年。
1968, around the developments of France, the French Main, or other very important developments globally from East Soviet bloc to Mexico. They were the year which was considered to bring out on the streets the biggest number of people ever after the Second World War.
那么1968年呢，它是在2战以后被认为是说，全世界规模最大的，而且遍布最广的一些这个起义的事件的一座。例如说，它从东欧开始，就是说当时还在共产阵营里面的东欧国家，一直到这个墨西哥，包括从法国的这个5月风暴的这些串联起来的全世界性的这个世界性的这个起义的浪潮。
At the same time, in the past years, we had the development of two very important social movements, the environmental movement and the feminist movement.
去年呢，我们必须注意的就是说，在社运界、在社运圈呢，有两个非常值得注意的这种运动的兴起，一个是环境运动、环保运动，一个是这个女性主义运动。
We referred to the feminist movement and the movement of the LGBTQ people yesterday in discussion, explaining how important it is and that it brought out millions in the streets in the past few years.
我们昨天重点讨论的那个女性主义的运动，还有讲说女性主义运动以及其他性别的 LGBTQ 的运动的如何动员了上百万的人民到上街去游行。
The movement for the defense of environment against climate crisis, against the environmental catastrophe, is also very important on a global scale.
然而，同样重要的是这个环境运动，他们对抗的是这个，他们抗议的是这种全球暖化的现状，然后他们这个运动实际上也十分重要。
So these developments of the struggle of people to defend their rights are very, very important. They are tremendous, actually.
这些人民为了这个自己的权利去进行斗争的这些运动都非常的重要，是非常重要的一些运动。
But at the same time, we have to see and have to say that most of these movements have been defeated.
但是在很多的情况下，我们不得不承认，他们都没有完全达成他们的目标。
We have to see reality therefore, but we also have to try to understand why they have been defeated.
所以呢，我们首先必须去认识，就是说我必须去承担他们的应有，但是我们也必须去正视说，必须去讨论说他们为什么失败。
The main conclusion that we can draw is that from an objective point of view, the system is completely reactionary.
那么我们首先第一点可以从这些客观的条件里面所总结出来的一点就是说。这整个体制是非常反动的。
From a theoretical point of view, we must stress that we have a great indication of the ideas of Marxism, which explained that Marx, more than 150 years ago, how the capitalist system would become a huge brake on the development of the economy, of the development of society and of civilization.
从这个理论的角度，我们有一个就是说。这首先证明了马克思在150年前的一个说法，就是说他认为这个资本主义的体制呢会成为一个就是说会导致经济社会还有文明的这个变化上面会导致一个巨大的就是说它会导致这些发展它会把这个发展刹车。
But Marxism also explained that the capitalist system, however reactionary and destructive it can become, it will never go away on its own.
但同时，马克思又预言说，不管资本主义它多么的反动，它多么的妨碍这些东西的这些文明的发展，它都不可能自己的。
The ruling class, that small number of people which control the planet, will never go away and will never give voluntarily their power and their wealth to the people.
那么这个一小群的这个统治阶级，他们永远都不会是说就没有了，我自己就要消失，他们也不会非常自愿的就把自己的权利交出来。
So that society can change only if this class is overthrown.
我们的这个社会要前进，就必须把这一小群人完全打。
And this is the role of the working class and the youth through major, big social struggles.
我们认为能做到这一点的，就是工人与青年，他们通过巨大的社会运动来实现。
But the fact is that what we have seen is that despite all the problems created by the system and despite all the struggles by the laboring masses, they have not been able to overthrow the capitalist system.
那我们必须真实的现实是，虽然资本主义已经产生了如此多的这些问题和危机，那么虽然有 这么多的这个工人，他们已经进行了这么多的斗争，但是到目前为止，我们还没有成功的推翻这件事情。
And this is primarily a problem which reflects the state of the political parties that claim to represent the working class masses on an international scale.
我认为这里的一个比较大的问题就是来自于那些自称的他们可以代表这些工人阶级的政党的问题。
I will come back to this point later because it's related to our tasks.
这跟我们接下来的任务会有相关，就思想。
Because we have to see how we can help to change the situation in the parties of the left, in other words, in the parties that represent the laboring masses.
因为我们要去看到说，我们要如何在这些党派的工作。
But before going to that point, I want to speak about the geopolitical situation.
但在这之前，我想先讲一下地缘政治。
Within the general decline of the capitalist system, there is a very important specific factor.
在资本主义的全面性的这个衰退的过程当中，有一个非常重要的。
We have the epoch of the decline of the United States and of the West as the dominant powers on the planet.
我们现在存在的美国作为它的一个世界霸权，还有西方作为一个世界的经济中心的一个衰退。
To put it in a bit of a simplified way, we see the end of the American century.
用一个简单的讲法，就是我们可以看到，我们正在目睹的是一个美国的世界。
And this is creating a vicious reaction on the part of US capitalism against its opponents.
这导致的是美国的资产阶级他们会用这种凶狠的方式去对待他们的对手。
There is no imperialist power in the history of humanity which granted power voluntarily and peacefully to its enemies.
但历史上从来没有一个帝国主义国家、帝国主义的势力，它会非常和平的把它的权力交给它的对手。
So the US imperialists, together with its alliances, what we call usually the West, will fight against the new forces that are rising on a global scale, questioning its power.
所以美国和它的西方朋友呢，一定会团结在一起，然后去对抗这个新兴的一个帝国主义势力。
So the historical decline of the United States and of Europe, which Europe has already declined.
所以美国的这个衰退，还有美国正在进行的衰退，还有欧洲已经完成的衰退。
It's not going to be a kind of a simple, fast, straightforward, and peaceful process.
不会是一个很快速、一蹴而就或者是和平的过程。
It's going to be a process of decline over decades.
它会持续数十年。
And it will cause huge instability on a global scale, economically and socially.
会在全世界的经济还有社会环境上造成很大的一些影响。
Of course, we hope and we aim that this process will be interrupted by the socialist revolution in many countries and internationally.
当然，我们的希望是，我们的梦想是说，这个过程在完成以前就发生全世界的社会主义革命。
But if this does not take place, then it's going to be decades of instability and major conflicts.
但是如果社会主义革命没有发生的话，那我们预测这个过程接下来会导致全世界的大规模的冲突。
The weakness of US imperialism has been seen, for example, in Iraq and Afghanistan, where they had to withdraw and actually they were defeated.
美国的衰落在某一些地方可以看到，例如说在伊拉克还有阿富汗、阿富汗斯坦，他们都必须撤军。
We see that many countries around the planet, tens of them, are gathering around BRICS, which is an alliance between China, Russia, Brazil, India, and South Africa.
看到全世界有许多的国家，他们聚集到这个所谓的金砖四国的这个组织附近。
But the dominant force, of course, is China.
当然，这个金砖国家的重点的这个势力就是。
We see traditional allies of the United States like Turkey and like Saudi Arabia, very important countries in the regions, which were very faithful and very loyal to the United States, now taking distances and approaching China and Russia.
我们看到美国在传统的在中东的一些盟友国家，例如说沙乌地阿拉伯还有土耳其，他们以前都是非常美国的坚定的盟友，但现在都开始与美国保持距离，甚至去跟这个中国或者俄国稍微接近。
But at the root of these developments, we have the fact that the U.S. economy is weak and it's becoming weaker, as I mentioned at the beginning. And second, and most important, it's a challenge on the economic level by China.
但这里的重点在于说美国的经济，这里的其实背后的重点就在于美国的经济它的持续的软弱疲软，还有说就是说受到中国的经济的。
It's not questionable that China in the next period, maybe years, maybe 1 or 2 decades, it will overtake the United States as the strongest economy on the planet.
我们认为这个可以被想象的一些事情，就是说中国可能会在未来的几十年或者更长的时间，最终的它可能会跟美国并驾齐驱。
And this is raising the issue of who is going to be the major power on the planet, and it's causing this competition between China and the US.
那它就会导致的问题就是说，全世界的这个霸权国家将会是谁的这个问题，然后它当然也导致了中美两国的这个巨大的目前的正在进行的冲突。
I should say a few things about the character of Chinese regime here.
我们这里必须讲一下，就是说我们对于中国的政权的理解。
Because this new Cold War that we experience, that we see, is not like the old Cold War, which finished around 1990.
因为我们现在看到的所谓的新冷战，跟我们过去上一次的冷战并不。
The first Cold War between the Soviet Union on the one hand and the United States and the West on the other was between different social systems.
在上一次的冷战里面，冷战的双方，也就是苏联跟美国，它代表的是不同的社会制度。
It was a competition between the Western capitalist powers and the planned economies of the Eastern Bloc around the Soviet Union.
当时他们的经济制度是一方面是所谓西方的这个自由市场经济，那另外一方则是东方阵营的这个计划经济。
But China cannot be described as some kind of a planned economy or a worker state.
但是当然，中国我们并不会认为它现在是一个任何意义上的这个计划经济或者是工业国家。
The CCP regime, the Communist Party of China regime, they call themselves communists and socialists, but China has no relationship to socialism or communism.
中共自称为这个共产主义的一个党派，但是我们知道中国现在并跟所谓的社会主义或者共产主义是一点关系。
It's a system that essentially works for Chinese capitalism and for the Chinese billionaires.
中国的体制就是一个为了中国的资产阶级、中国的好。
We do not accept that a system in which there is no democracy can be described as socialist.
我不认为一个不民主的体制可以被称作是社会主义。
Socialism and so much more communism by necessity means freedom of expression.
社会主义，然后更别提共产主义，在我们这里的地理是，当然必须包括人身自由。
Freedom of existence of independent unions and social movements.
当然必须允许这个独立的、自由的工会，还有组织。
Freedom of organization.
结社的自由。
And particularly freedom to organize political parties for the working class.
还有当然的，应该允许这个结成工人阶级自己的政党。
Nothing of any of this exists in China.
目前中国完全没有上述的任何。
It's a country in which the market forces dominate. In other words, capitalist relations dominate.
中国是一个就是说市场经济占主导地位，也就是所谓的这个像资本主义占主导地位的国家。
But at the same time, we have to see that there are special characteristics in this capitalist society, and this is the strong role of the Communist Party and the control it has on the state.
但是这里我们也必须注意到，中国的这个作为一个资本主义国家，它的特殊之处，也就是中共政府对于它的市场的严格管控。
But because of these characteristics of the Chinese state and Chinese society, this new Cold War is not between the capitalist countries and a socialist or some kind of socialism, but it's a conflict between two capitalist powers.
那因此呢，我们可以说，当前的这个新冷战，它并不是并不是资产阶级，并不是资本主义对抗任何某种社会主义的对抗。而是两个资本主义国家之间的对抗，而这两种资本主义国家它具有不同的特质。
So it's a struggle for domination between two imperialist blocs, and we cannot support either of them.
所以目前的发生的这个新冷战是两个不同的帝国主义阵营之间的对抗，而我们以原则上来讲是不能实施。
As I said before, we cannot expect this a conflict to finish in the near future.
我们预测他们这个冲突还会持续非常长的时间。
And actually, in the foreseeable future, we cannot expect that China can take the role that the US is playing now, or it has played in the past, let's say, 1 century.
我们也认为，在可预见的未来里面，中国还不可能完全取代掉美国的在世界上目前或者是过去美国霸权时代的扮演角色。
China is questioning the hegemony of the United States, but it cannot develop into the superpower of the planet in the foreseeable future.
中国现在正在挑战美国的霸权，但是它仍然还没有能力去自己发展成美国这样的超级强权。
Because the West will ally itself against China.
因为所谓的西方阵营目前一定会就是说对抗中国。
But also because a new force is developing on the planet, and this is India, and this will reveal itself in the next decades.
还有另外一点是，这个世界上还有其他的新兴的势力正在兴起，比如说印度。那么印度，我们认为在接下来的10年左右就会开始展露它的力量。
So we cannot predict a situation in which there is one power, which is the policeman of the planet, but we can expect major blocks antagonizing each other.
所以我们认为世界目前看起来不太可能发展到新的一个稳定的一个状态，就是说有一个非常强大的强权可以管控，可以去控制这个世界。相反，我们认为它接下来的这个时代将会存在的几个不同的阵营，然后这几个不同阵营之间会彼此互相的冲突。
But this does not alleviate the fact that the United States will fight fiercely against the fact that they will be losing their dominant position on the planet.
但是当然没有办法排除的一点就是说，美国绝对不会就是说甘于失去他们目前的世界强权的地位，因为努力的想要反击，然后夺回。
These contradictions are discussed openly on a global scale between the representatives of capital.
这个问题目前在全世界这个就是说资产阶级国家的外交官之间已经是非常公开的。
They look with a lot of worry at BRICS, which I mentioned before.
他们对这个金砖4国有非常大的焦虑。
BRICS was created after the 2008-2009 global financial and economic crisis.
金砖国家建立的起源是这个2008年的这个经济危机之后。
BRICS is an acronym which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
那么金砖其实金砖五国，它是巴西、俄罗斯、印度、中国跟这个南非的组成。
BRICS now, which of course has as its fundamental basis the strength of the Chinese economy, now represents the biggest proportion of the population and a bigger proportion of the global GDP compared to G7, which is the 7 biggest capitalist countries internationally.
说金砖五国，它这个代表的人口以及它的 GDP 占比，在全世界的占比已经超过了我们的 G7 的占比。G7 就是我们知道的这个最先进的7个工业国家。
At this stage, about 44 countries are knocking the door of BRICS.
目前有大概44个国家正在申请加入这个金砖国家。
That's a big number of countries.
这是很多的国家。
And they are discussing creating a new international bank which will function as the opposite of the International Monetary Fund.
那么金砖国家正在讨论建立一个新的可以跟这个国际货币组织相对抗的国际银行。
And they are also discussing what is called de-dollarization. In other words, the attempt to create a new currency that will replace the dollar as the main exchange and reserve currency on the planet.
他们也在讨论要发明一个新的这个货币，可以来取代美元在他们之间交易的时候的这个贸易储备。
As things are now, the dynamic is on the part of the BRICS. They are developing faster, and this is creating a lot of anxiety in the West.
目前来说，主动权是在金砖国家这边，他们的发展的速度相对比较快，所以就导致了西方国家有比较多的这个担忧。
The strategists of capital are predicting that in the next decades, China will be the first power on the planet.
资产阶级的有一些这个策略家认为，中国在接下来的10年会成为就影响力最大的国家。
The United States will be the second.
美国可能会变成第二。
And India will be the third.
印度是第三。
And this means that Europe will be sidetracked, and also Japan will go into what's the word? They will become much less important than they're already today.
这样的结果就是欧盟和日本这些国家就会变得。
Today, on a global scale, the alliance which determines policies for the whole planet is the United States, Japan, and the European Union.
目前在全球范围内，可以就是说决定全球的这个规则的，大概就是美国、欧盟跟日本的。
In the next decades, these forces will not be able to decide for the planet.
但在接下来的10年内，就可能发生的情况是，这个联盟不再有这个同等的实力可以去决定全世界的规则。
And this is what is causing the kind of competitions and frictions that we see on a global scale today.
这就是我们目前看到的矛盾，还有这个摩擦的感觉。
One of the aspects of this competition is the trade war that we see between the United States and China.
这些冲突的其中一个面向就是这些贸易战。
This trade war started in 2017 when, after the election of Donald Trump in the United States,
这个贸易战是川普在2017年上海开始。
He initially put restrictions on the import of some materials like steel.
他一开始只是禁止了某些物品，比如说钢铁的进口。
Then he attacked Huawei, the company which had become the biggest company in new technologies on the planet.
然后接下来商品呢是针对了这个华为，因为华为是对在发展5G 技术比较先进的。
And he was able to isolate Huawei from the West, and there was a collapse in its sales.
然后接下来他 美国成功的把华为从全世界的这个经济当中隔离出去，然后导致了它的崩溃，让它没有办法继续运行。
And then the new president of the United States, Joe Biden, has intensified this trade war with the banning on semiconductors, on chips.
而接下来拜登接任之后，又加强了这个贸易战的过程，然后把这个半导体让半导体没有办法输出给中国。
The more serious strategies of capital are very worried about this policy of trade war.
很多的这个资产阶级的这个策略专家呢，对这个贸易战的效果非常的担心。
Because many of the serious analysts they believe that China will respond and that in the end the United States and the West will pay a very heavy cost for it.
因为很多这些分析师认为说中国一定会反击，那么西方势力一定会因此遭受到很大的这个惩罚。
When it comes to protectionist measures like what the US is doing, as a rule, they are followed by similar measures by the countries that are affected by these measures.
通常如果有发生贸易保护政策的这个情况的话，在历史上来说，那么通常一定会遭受这个对应的国家的这个被针对的国家一定会违禁相应的政策。
So after the US decided to ban sales of very developed semiconductors to China, China recently decided to restrict the sales of the raw materials that make these semiconductors in the West.
所以呢，美国最近来说，美国把这个先进的半导体禁止出口给中国之后，中国回敬的方式就是去禁止出口这个制造这些半导体的一些贵金属。
They are called gallium and germanium.
这些金属是例如像钾，还有这个我之前大家知道中文咖喱还有这个钠镁点，我来到中文对啊，那种远金属元素。
China is a producer of what is called rare earths, which are necessary for the production of the modern technologies that we see around the planet.
中国是这个稀土元素的一个重要出口国，稀土元素是现在的很多这些半导体必要的一种材料。
But now India is entering this competition of protectionist measures.
但现在连印度也开始加入这个贸易保护的政策的这个对抗。
Initially, they decided to stop exporting rice or certain types of rice to push the price of rice on a global scale because it's in the interest of the economy of India.
例如最近来说，印度禁止出口的某一种类型的国有米，然后这样的好处就是说，它会让全世界的这个米的价格增高，那么这对印度的这个自己的出口是有好处的。
But also 2 days ago, they decided to put restrictions on the import of computers, laptops, PCs imported from the West because they want to develop their own machines.
但是最近呢，印度又进一步的去限制从西方进口这些电脑啊，还有这个高级就是说先进技术的这些产品，因为它的目的是他们想要发展他们本国的这个工业。
So the policies of the United States and the West is like a double-edged knife.
所以呢，这个西方的使用的这些贸易保护政策，说到底是一个双刃剑。
We don't think that they can stop China from becoming the strongest economy in the next 1 or 2 decades.
我们并不认为说这些政策会有助于说主导中国成为在接下来的1-20年内成为世界上最大的经济体。
But they can slow down China.
他们确实是有可能可以减慢这个过程。
So instead of overcoming the United States in, let's say, the next 5 years, it could be 1 or 2 decades.
所以呢，中国本来就说，如果完全没有这些政策的话，中国本来有可能就是说在5年内超过美国，但是因为有这些政策，这个过程可能会加长到，例如说几十年或者20年。
But this doesn't mean that in any way the conflict between the two major powers will be softer in any way.
但是这并不代表说这两个大型的帝国主义国家之间的冲突会有任何的减缓。
Now, the war in Ukraine. This war is precisely a reflection of the forces that we explained before.
那么关于乌克兰战争，它这个战争很明显的也是我们今天讨论各种因素的这个一个范围。
It's a reflection of the shifting balance of forces on a global scale.
它是全世界的这种力量对比的这个的一个变化。
It's a reflection of the power of U.S. imperialism.
它是一个反映的就是说美国帝国主义的力量。
It's a reflection of the rise of China, which is the closest ally of Russia.
它同时也反映的就是说中国的兴起，因为中国是俄国最大的。
And the fact that this war is a reflection of this balance of forces means that we can expect similar developments in the future in other parts of the planet.
那么，因为乌克兰战争是这些因素的反应，所以我们可以预测说，类似的情况可能会在全世界其他地方发生。
We can expect what is described as proxy wars to be more frequent and more violent than in the past.
我们可以预期这种所谓的这种代理战争在全世界各地可能会更加频繁的发生，并且会更加有激烈。
Because the different imperialist blocs will support different sides in order to gain advantages.
因为这些不同的这些帝国主义阵营，他们可能就会在一个冲突发生的时候，他们就可能会去支持这个冲突当中不同方，然后因从当中试图从当中得到某些利益。
I should say a few things about the war.
那我想对这个战争说几句话。
When the war started, from the very beginning, we said that this war will not end in the foreseeable future.
在这个战争刚开始的时候，我们就说这个战争在可见的未来可能很难立刻就结束。
None of the two sides will be willing to sign an agreement to grant victory to the other side.
双方都不太可能去，就是说愿意去在一个和平协议上的签字，然后就是说承认自己的失败。
Ukraine, with the support of the West, has gone on a big counteroffensive in the last 2 months.
在过去2个月里面，乌克兰借着西方的这些援助呢，开启了一个非常大规模的这个反击。
But that is not successful.
但目前为止并不是这样的情况。
Already in this counteroffensive of the last 2 months, tens of thousands of soldiers have lost their lives.
在过去这个2个月的这个反攻当中，已经有大概1万多名士兵失去了生命。
From both sides.
这个是包括双方的士兵。
But the trenches, the line hasn't really moved.
但是他们挖的这些战壕，还有他们的这些占领的区域的界限，并没有明显的移动。
Despite this, the war will continue because Ukraine and the United States, they want to impose as much damage as possible on Russia and hope maybe they could force it to go back.
虽然如此，这个战争他们仍然不会放弃这样的战争，因为乌克兰和美国都希望借这个战争，或者说美国希望借这个战争去对俄罗斯施加尽可能多的伤害，然后最后让俄罗斯可能支撑不住的自己生命。
And on the other hand, it's impossible for Russia to retreat.
那另一方面，对于俄罗斯的角度来说，它也不可能撤军。
The main thing in relation to the war, I think, is our position.
我想，关于这个战争呢，我觉得比较重要的一点就是我们应该采取立场。
There is a big discussion in the left internationally about which side to support.
在全世界的左派里面，有过非常大的这样的一个讨论，说我们应该支持哪一方。
Some anti-capitalist left organizations say they should support Ukraine because it's a poor country attacked by a big, strong imperialist Russia.
例如有一些左派的组织会说，我 我们应该支持乌克兰，因为乌克兰是一个很穷的国家，它现在被一个帝国主义国家所侵略。
There is another side which says that we must support Russia because Russia is fighting against the whole of the West, American imperialism, European imperialism, which have been colonializing the planet for decades and centuries, and they have caused the biggest attack on the people in the third world countries.
另一方面，我们也有一些组织，他们可能会说，我们应该支持俄国，因为俄国现在正在对抗的是美国帝国主义，还有欧洲帝国主义。那么欧美帝国主义呢，他们是全世界对全世界的第三世界国家造成的掠夺，还有这个殖民最严重的这个邪恶势力，这个意思。
Our position is that we cannot support either side because we have two reactionary blocks.
而我们自己的立场是说，我们认为我们不能支持这个方，因为这是两个反动阵营之间的对抗。
I will elaborate a little bit on this, but before going on to that, I would say that I think this is the position that is supported by the majority of the anti-capitalist left internationally.
我会稍微细讲这个，不过我认为目前来说，这个应该似乎是就是说大部分的国际上大部分的国际组织最后去同意的这样的。
On the basis of this, the comrades that we work together with in Italy around Corrente, it's an Italian organization that works with the international standpoint, took an initiative and called an internationalist meeting in Milan to discuss the war and international developments.
例如我们在意大利合作的一个组织，他们叫做逆流 Countercurrent， 他们就这个在伊比兰呢组织了一个就是说国际主义的讨论会来讨论这个问题。
I will say a few things about this later on. It was a very important and very successful meeting.
那么我接下来会稍微讲这个会议是这样子。
But I want to elaborate a little bit on what we say about this war, our political positions about this war.
但是我想对这个，我们想对这个战争的这个政治立场做一些说明。
This war has many aspects.
这场战争有许多的方面。
One aspect is that NATO began to expand in the previous decades into the Eastern Bloc and invited one country after another to join NATO, and we are opposed to that.
一方面呢，那个北约在过去几年进行了东扩，他们邀请了许多这个东欧的国家加入北约，我们对这一点是表示反对。
Because they were cornering Russia, and this could cause a violent reaction.
因为我们认为这样的行为是在把这个俄罗斯逼到一个没有办法的位置，然后导致它的非常暴力的这个回应。
In 2014, Ukrainian government started a war against the Russophone populations of eastern Ukraine who were demanding their right of self-determination.
2014年呢，这个乌克兰政府开始了对，就是说他们境内的讲俄语的族群的一场内战。这场内战的重点是要去反对他们的这个决。
In this conflict, we support the right of self-determination of the Russophone populations because it's a democratic right, and we are opposed to the Ukrainian government.
在这样的一场冲突当中，我们是支持这个讲俄语乌克兰境内的讲俄语的族群，他们具有他们的权利，我们认为这是一个任何的人民的基本权利。
In 2022, last year, Russia invaded Ukraine, and we are opposed to that.
而2022年，俄罗斯入侵了乌克兰，那我们对这里是反对的。
It's a reactionary imperialist intervention, invasion, and Russia, we demand that Russia should abandon the territories that it has occupied.
那我们因为这是一场就是说反动的这个军事侵略，那我们认为说俄罗斯应该立刻放弃他们现在占领的所有土地。
But at the same time, the whole of the West has entered the side of Ukraine with massive armed support and massive financial support.
那另一方面，西方的这些国家呢，就站到了乌克兰的这边，它进行了很大的经济援助和军事援助。
Of all these elements, what is the dominant element?
那么在这个不同的这些互相矛盾的这些因素当中，哪个才是最重要？
We think that the dominant element is the fact that we have two imperialist camps fighting against each other.
那我们认为，在这么多的因素里面，最重要的一点是我们现在有两个帝国主义的阵营，他们正在互相对抗。
Imperialist Russia on the one hand, imperialist NATO on the other hand.
一方面是帝国主义的俄国，另一方面则是帝国主义的这个北约。
And we cannot support either side.
我们并不应该去支持的。
But we support the people of Russia against the Putin government.
那我们支持俄国人民去起来反抗普京的手。
And we support the people of Ukraine against both Putin, but also against Zelensky, the reactionary government.
那我们同时也支持乌克兰，我们同时也支持乌克兰人民起来反对。一方面是反对这个普京政权，一方面是反对他们自己泽连斯基的反攻政权。
And of course, we support the democratic right of the Russian-speaking populations of eastern Ukraine to decide for themselves what kind of regime they want to have for their area.
那么我们当然也同样的去支持，就是说在乌克兰境内的讲俄语族群，他们有权利去决定他们自己要有什么样的政府。
We are not in a position, and the left internationally is not in a position to stop the war or to decide the character of a peace agreement.
我们觉得我们的国际左翼呢，当然是没有这个力量。我们目前我们是非常弱小，没有这个力量去真正的去把这个战争停止，或者是说去决定最后的和平协议会长什么样子。
And therefore, what we can do is to explain our positions in the sense of what we would do if we had the power to impose our ideas on the situation.
所以我们能做的就是说去解释，我们如果有这样的权利，那我们会做些什么事情。
And in this way, we can help consciousness, in other words, the understanding of people, to develop and to go away from the simplistic dilemma: are you with Russia or with Ukraine, which is simplifying matters and is not responding to the depth and the complexities of the situation.
那么我们希望是说，通过这样的做法，我们可以提升人们的意识，那么可以让人们从对这种比较简化的化约的这个二元论里面解脱出来，就是说，你要么就是站在俄罗斯里面，要么就是站在乌克兰。
Now, all of these factors that I have been mentioning for the past, from the beginning of this contribution, they affect the way people think on a global scale. They affect consciousness, as we say.
我刚才讲到这些因素，它对全世界人民的这个意识都有非常大的影响。
The issue of poverty, the economic crisis, the issue of hunger in new colonial countries, the youth movements on environment, the feminist movement, the geopolitical instability and the Ukraine war are all affecting consciousness.
就包括贫穷啊，还有这个新兴国家的这些就是说这个他们的这个饥饿，还有说这个民主运动、LGBT 运动、环境运动，还有现在的这些战争，他们都影响了思想。
But there is another factor that I want to raise in this discussion, which has to do with the way we would like consciousness to develop.
但是这里还有另外一个因素，希望能够影响到人们思想。
I'm sure we have all heard and maybe some of you are very much interested in what is called artificial intelligence.
那么这里有一点就是说很多人可能不知道，很多人也非常有兴趣的就是 AI 的部分。
Artificial intelligence provides a tremendous potential to human.
AI 对人类的这个进步是具有很大的潜力。
It can make a lot of the work that we have to labor to do today much easier to be done by machines.
它可以让机器代替人们去做很多现在很多的这个比较也会令人疲劳的一些疲惫的工作。
And this is only at the very, very initial stages. It can develop with leaps and bounds in the next years.
目前的 AI 仍然只是在一个非常初期的阶段，那在接下来的几十年内会就是说突然迅猛的发展。
But artificial intelligence is not the only technological breakthrough of the recent period.
但是 AI 也不是近年来就是说唯一一个有着进展的事情。
Robotics is another one.
另外一个则是机械技术。
Robots are becoming more and more a part of our daily lives.
那我们的日常生活中也会越来越多这种机器人的动画。
Whole factories are now based on the work of robots without human hands touching the final material, but only directing the robots.
现在有许多的工厂已经完全的实现动画，那么当中工人基本都不需要去直接的触碰这些产品，只需要去给新机器人下指令。
Robots begin to replace works like, for example, the work of delivery workers.
有一些地方使用这种机器人来代替这个送货的人，机器人送货。
Instead of having young people on scooters distributing goods, food, or any other goods to different addresses, they just put the information on the machine and it goes on its own.
就是说不再需要就是说这个有人就是说骑车那么去送货送菜，相反的只是说有一些机器人他们可能可以这个你把地址输入给他们，他会自己过去。
This is just two aspects of the work that robots can do today, but there is more than that.
目前当然还有别的一些这个机器人可以影响我们社会生活的方式。
In the previous decade, we had the development of three-dimensional printers.
在过去10年内，我们发明了所谓的这个3D。
These are huge machines that they can produce on their own without humans touching the final any part of the process or the final outcome of the production process.
这些机器有办法，就是说完全自动化的去完成一些制作的过程。
So a 3D printer can be given the directions, then it can build on its own and be given the directions and the materials, and it will build on its own a house.
所以有一些这个3D 列印机的，他们有一些甚至可以说用这个3D 列印机把它建造出一整个房子。
Or a block of houses, a small village, or a big village.
或者建造出一整个这个小城镇。
They can build roads and they can build bridges.
他们可以用来建造这个道路，或者是用来铺路，或者是用来铺桥。
Okay, so let's think about how the future could be for our lives if we were able to introduce three-dimensional printers, robots, and artificial intelligence in the production process and in the daily life of our work.
所以，如果我们在日常的生活中，我们日常的工作当中也可以应用到这些最新的科技，会怎么样呢？
It would mean that humans would be relieved of the necessity to work in order to produce the basic necessity for life.
这些的结果将会是，就是说人类将会有办法从我们很多的日常的这个工作当中放出来。
Because this will be done by machines.
因为很多机器会完成。
Machines will be in the service of humanity.
这些机器就会为我们服务。
if society could employ these methods in the production process and in the distribution process, the working day could go from 8 hours now to 4 to 2 in very short space of time.
如果没有能力，比如说应用这些科技来改善我们的这个日常工作的效率的话，那就有可能我们每天的工作时长就可以从8小时缩短到4小时或者更短。
If this could be possible, then human beings would, instead of working all day to get a small salary, just survive. If they survive, they could spend their time to develop themselves.
如果这是可能的话，那我们就不太会需要就是说每天工作非常长的时间，只为了获得一点点可以糊口的这个薪水。相反的，我们可能就是可以每天工作一小段的时间，然后之后可以用剩下的时间来去这个发展自己，去完成自我实现的事情。
To be educated in the fields that really interest them, and not to learn in the universities the kind of profession that will give them a job later, whether they like it or not.
我们可能就是可以在大学里面，我们可以去学习我们真正感兴趣的科目，而不一定就是说那些容易想要找工作的科目。
Human beings can invest in science and arts. They can invest in their talents, and they can do essentially what they would like to do in life instead of doing what they have to do.
人们可以就是说去研究艺术或者是科学，那么我们可以去研究各种各样的东西，而不是我们可以做就是说最基本的最需要的这些工作，而不是很多时候我们被要求的。
And under such conditions, we could expect a huge impact, positive impact, in the development of relations between people and civilization in general. And this is something that we also discussed yesterday in relation to feminist struggles and relations between the sexes.
同样的，我们就可以，如果这样的一些条件能够成立的话，那我们也可以就是说想象一个人与人之间的关系更加和谐的这样一个社会。那么我们昨天在讨论女性主义的这个话题，就下面带到了这个话题，带到我们的部分。
So this is the potential that is provided to us today by the level of science and by the level of technology. But it's impossible to expect that this will happen after capitalism.
所以这是我们目前人类已知的这些科技已经可以带给我们的潜在的可能性，但是在资本主义的这个制度下呢，这些是这是不可能。
It's impossible for capitalism to look at new technologies as an opportunity to make the life of people better.
所以资本主义来说，它看到一个新的科技，它不可能拿来说，它第一步不可能是拿来改善人的生活。
Capitalism will take new technologies in order to use them to create profits.
对于资本主义来说，他看到一个新科技的时候，他的第一步思想就是说，我要用它来生产生成更多的这个利润。
In order to create profit, it means that it has to sack workers, that it has to fire workers.
那么为了要用这些新科技来创造利润的话，那么最常见的一种方法就是他会开始去用这些技术去替换掉工人，把这些工人给裁员。
It is estimated that in the next years, 300 million jobs will be lost because of artificial intelligence alone.
那么有这个预测说，在接下来的这些几十年里面，可能会有30亿的这个工作可能会。
So the new technology
会失去，会因为这些自动化的过程失去。
So the new technologies will increase unemployment, and they will increase underemployment.
所以它就会导致这个失业率的增加。
And when unemployment increases, wages are pushed down. So wages will go down on an international level.
而因为这个失业率的增加呢，一定会相伴的就是这个工资的水准的降低，所以我们全世界的这个工资水准一定会慢慢就会降。
And of course, what is happening today, we see it happening today, attacks on rights, attacks on trade union rights, attacks on democratic rights internationally, in order to stop people from protesting. This will intensify in the period ahead.
而我们现在已经看到一些现象，比如说对于工会组织权利的这个消减，还有去民主权利的消减，让人们没有办法去抗议这种对于劳工权利的这些倾向。那么在接下来的这些10年内，这些现象一定会更加的强烈。
So these new technologies, they could be a blessing for society, but actually they can turn into an nightmare.
对，这些科技它们本来有可能为我们的社会带来很好的结果，但是真正来说，它们更有可能会成为我们的恶魔。
This is the logic of capitalism, and of course we have to defend ourselves and our rights against this logic.
那么这个就是资本主义它内在的逻辑，而我们要想办法去对抗这个逻辑，去保护我们自己。
At the beginning, I mentioned many movements internationally, which tried precisely to defend the rights of working people, the popular layers, the youth on an international level.
我们之前已经讲过的许多的这些运动是要为了去捍卫我们的这个工人阶级自己的权益，还有这些年轻人自己的权益。
And I also mentioned that most of these struggles have been unfortunately defeated.
然后我们也说了，很可惜的，这些很多的大部分的这些运动都失败了。
The main reason for this is that there is no fighting leadership leading these movements.
那我们认为这个其中的一个很大的因素是说，它不够那些领导这些运动的这些领导层都不够的有这个。
The political parties and the trade union and other social organizations that represent the working people, they are not fighting to the end for the interests of the working people.
这些领导他们这些运动的，比如说政党或者是工会组织，很多时候他们都没有办法坚持斗争到底。
So there is no fighting leadership, but there is in big sections of the population, and especially the youth, there is a big search for ideas, and there is openness about ideas, and that is the main hope for the future.
因为我们在领导层里面缺少非常有能力，就是说斗争到最后，但是我们在基层，就是说基本的这些工人，还有基本的这些草根的这些年轻人里面，却有很多人是非常的open， 然后他们非常的愿意去吸收新的思想，那这就是我们对未来的希望。
The picture that we see of the parties that are called progressive or left on an international scale is one of the worst pictures we have ever seen in the history of the left movement.
就是说，目前我们在全世界范围内看到的，就是说自称为左翼或者自称为进步势力的这些党派，很可惜的是，近几十年来，或者说有史以来在左翼的历史里面，我们看到的目前是最差的状况。
And this creates a big vacuum in society, which is taken advantage by the far-right parties. This was also discussed yesterday.
那么我们在这样的这种其严重的左翼的这个缺位的过程当中，就这个政治争锋就通常就是被这个极右派被利用。那我们昨天其实也带到这里。
The far-right is on the rise internationally.
那全世界范围内极右派都在兴起。
Even in countries which have traditions of stable democracies, as they are called.
甚至就在那些就是说传统上有一个稳定的民主制度的这些国家，极右派也正在兴起。
We have such phenomena in the United States with the rise of Donald Trump.
比如说，在美国有这个川普的兴起。
In Brazil, the biggest country economy in Latin America, with the rise of Bolsonaro.
在巴西，也就是拉丁美洲最重要的经济里面，这个波斯纳罗的兴起。
But the problem is especially serious in Europe.
但是这个情况在欧洲是最为严重。
Where in one country after another, they receive bigger percentages in the polls or they take control of governments, like the Meloni government in Italy in the recent period.
那一个又一个的欧洲国家里面，极右派政党，他们在这个票里面的支持率越来越高，甚至在某些国家还成功的就是说控制了政局，例如在意大利的这个梅洛尼。
And these parties are actually trying to turn society and culture backwards.
这些极右派政党，他们的这个政治的目的是要把社会的进步给它反转。
They want conservative morals to dominate.
他们希望一种保守派的道德
They want to
可
push
以回来，
people back to religion and into the churches.
他们希望人们回归到教堂还有教会里面。
They want to force women back into the house to take care of the family.
他们希望女性们回到这个家庭里面，成为家庭的附属，去做这些工作。
And they cultivate the ideas of nationalism and racism, which are preparing future clashes and even wars.
他们还就是说努力的煽动这种种族主义，还有这个民族主义精神，为了将来可能发生的更恐怖的这些冲突做准备。
And the far right will continue to increase until there are new forces, progressive, radical, left forces built in society that they can provide inspiration and hope to the people.
我们认为这些右翼势力或这些极右翼势力，他们会继续的这个成长，直到我们拥有足够强大的一个左翼的势力，或者说进步的激进的势力，能够去启发这个社会，告诉我们说还有别的一条路可以走。
This is a task that we have to respond to.
而这个是我们目前来说必须担下的责任。
It's not something outside our responsibilities.
这不是我们可以就是说不是的，就是
It's not someone else's responsibilities.
也不是别的人可以替我们做的事情。
We have to see what we can do to build fighting, progressive, radical, left political forces, which can provide inspiration to the mass of the population, so that they fight for a long-term society.
我们必须就是说建造一个战斗性的，然后激进的、进步的一个左翼的势力，那用这个势力呢来启发大众们去为一个不同的一条路去战斗。
And we have to do this not only on a national, but on an international level, because there are no solutions on the national level.
我们不仅要在国家层面做这件事情，还必须在国际层面做，因为我们目前来说是不可能在一个国家层面的话，就是。
In this sense, we follow the traditions of the great revolutionaries of the past 150 years, from Marx and Engels to Lenin to Trotsky to Rosa Luxemburg in the beginning first decades of the previous centuries.
那这点来说，我们正继承了这个过去150年间各位革命先人他们的这个传统，比如说马克思、恩格斯、列宁、托洛斯基、罗萨卢森堡等等。
This is what we do as ISF in Taiwan and as ISP, International Standpoint, on an international level.
而这是我们 ISF， 就是说国际社会主义审计在台湾做的，也是我们国际社会主义立场在全世界范围是可以做的。
We try to build sizable organizations in our countries. We try to expand in new countries, but at the same time, we want to work together with other anti-capitalist organizations internationally.
我们试图在各个国家建立做强大的组织，然后试图去在新的国家建立组织。但更重要的是，我们也非常希望从现存的一些左翼组织、反资本主义的这些组织去做。
We aim to meet with other anti-capitalist organizations to exchange ideas and learn from each other in a common effort to build strong forces internationally.
我希望可以与这些左翼的反资本主义的组织呢去交流，然后去交流你的想法，然后呢去进行对话，然后可以与他们，然后最终与他们合作，去尝试建立一些更大的东西。
There are no mass 8 months anti-capitalist revolutionary parties internationally, but there are significant forces of the anti-capitalist revolutionary socialist left internationally.
目前在全世界范围内并不存在着一个大众性质的这个革命政党，但是存在着一些比较有意义的这个革命性的这个组织。
The most important presence is Argentina, where there is a semi-mass force of about 6% of the population, which is very significant.
其中一个很重要的例子就是阿根廷，也有大概6% 的支持率，是给了一个女性的政党。
There are also sizable organizations of this character in Brazil and in Southern Europe, in countries like Spain, like Greece, and like Italy.
其他呢，在一些就是说巴西还有南欧的一些国家，例如说西班牙还有希腊，都有类似性质的一些组织。
As I said, in such countries, anti-capitalist organizations may not be in parliament or have a big force, but they play a significant role in the development of local movements or national movements.
像我们现在说的这些组织，它可能并没有进入政府或者进入议会，但是他们在他们在一些当地的地方上的势力的这个政治过程里面，可能会有比较大的影响力。
We believe that because of the crisis of the capitalist system, there will be revolutionary currents and organizations developing in many countries, and as international currents in the next years and decades.
像我们这些绿色的、由于资本主义的这些危机，那么在接下来的几十年内，就是世界范围内应该会有更多的像我们这样的流派的这个艺术界。
And we believe that the future mass revolutionary international organization can be created through the merger or amalgamation, unification of these revolutionary forces and currents.
我们也相信，就是说，一个国际性的、群众性的革命性政党或者是组织，可以通过汇合或者说融合各种流派，还有各种这个国际上的各种组织来完成。
We try to facilitate this process, these processes, and it's in this context that our comrades in Italy took the initiative to invite an international conference last month in Milan, Italy.
那么我们觉得这个我们自己也应该为这个东西做一点事情。所以，那么秉承着这个精神呢，我们在米兰的同志们在上个月就举办了这样的峰会。
About 30 different organizations met in Milan, some national organizations, but many international currents. And it was a very useful and a very important meeting.
那么在这场会议上有大概30多个组织他们有很多是意大利本地的组织，但是有都来自不同的国际上的流派。那么他们都大家一起聚在一起讨论的这些事情，那么它是一个非常有成果的一个会议。
Of course, there were differences there, but that's not the point. The point is to be able to work together and learn from each other, despite the different opinions that may exist.
我们当然之间存在着各种各样的分歧，但是这里的重点并不是要去关注我们的分歧，而是重点在于说，我们虽然存在的分歧，但我们仍然能够进行合作，然后能够进行这些交流。
For all these reasons, comrades, in order to be able to succeed in these tasks and these aims, targets that we have, we need to strengthen the ISF and in Taiwan and the international standpoint on international.
为了能够更好的达成这个目标呢，我们还是需要例如说在台湾加强我们的这个国际收紧的情境，那么在国际范围上呢，去加强我们自己的这个国际主义立场。
A stronger ISF and a stronger IST will provide the stepping stones for these efforts to be more successful in the period ahead.
那么，如果我们自己把 ISF 还有这个国际上的这个 IST 建设的更加的强大的话，会有更多的号召力来吸引跟大家来跟我们合作。
And I hope that many of the comrades who are here and they are not still members of ISF and ISP, if they agree with this idea, will take the step to assist our work in this direction.
那我们也希望在场如果有还不是我们成员的各位来宾，那么会愿意加入我们的这个帮助我们去完成这个过程。
Thank you, comrades.
谢谢。
好，那我们现在休息我们要休息5分钟还是10分钟？10分钟，好，我们休息10分钟，因为讲座比较久，所以我们休息10分钟的时间。 好，因为我们现场还有一些人没有回来，所以我们再多等2到3分钟的时间。好，其实我们现在要开始，但是我们的讲者不见了，所以我们可能要再等一下子，等讲者回来。好，那我们现在可以进入到 Q&A 的环节。那如果线上的朋友你也要，现在喇叭没电。
他们刚好拿去充电，应该可以有了吗？
线上的朋友如果要发言的话，就可以打说你要发言或者是要发问，然后我们这边是有喇叭，我们等一下接一下就可以把喇叭接出来，然后麻烦就是先打说你要发言或发问，让我们这个场做电脑控制的同事可以知道一下有要发言，
帮我
然后现场的朋友如果要发言或发问，就直接举手就可以。有人要发言或发问的吗？好，委员。
大家好，我是伟伟。然后我昨天有来，我想问一下昨天的一个问题，就是有的国家会禁止女性读大学，那如何看待那个这个问题，或者是说因为如何看待说就是女性可能会导致少子化？然后第二个问题，
现在这个我们现在会有。
第二个问题，
现在讲，那这是在直播那个talk show，more like a talk show. Let's say the talk show is some certain country will ban for the talk show education. And if they say that women needed to educate as a feminist, the cost your population.
好，第二个问题的话是刚才有提到自动化，然后我想问说，因为我本身是台湾无条件基本收入协会的成员，然后想问问看，是否会支持无条件基本收入，然后甚至是全球性的基本收入，或者是全民普发，每个年数能增加。
Second question is, these comments so about what idea about it, trying to react. Do you think it's good that first question is that sometimes they are banned for the consider wasn't for the this they have what will cause population
第三个问题的话是，无条件的收入可能会导致离婚率增加，因为可能会有一些妻子会离开家暴，然后跟丈夫这样子。
这是问题。
是如何看待的？
如何看待 ？First question is like, certainly some people say they do this universal basic income cost women to be different because they now get on the system. So what do we say about that?
好，那虽然我们有3个问题了，但是我想我们还是可以让下一个如果有要发言或者是有要问问题的人可以举手。我看到有人一直在 Q 人，所以有要发言吗？
我问问题。
好，我们的陈佑有一个问题。
就是我想更深入的了解，刚刚讲到说这个印度在未来可能会崛起嘛，那我们左翼是怎么样看待这个过程，或者说这个会对我们有什么影响？对。
The question is, that's how
好，那我们先回答这4个问题，然后我们在下一轮的时候再进入到等一下的 Q&A。
Yeah, because we have both. Yeah, we will basically answer the matches.
So that is false. And
I think that the first question of the community in the background well, actually, the questions that he raised are linked to the issue of women relations with gender issues, gender equality, and what we say about that. This was discussed more extensively in yesterday's discussion.
那第一个问题显然是关于这个女性的权益还有两性平等的问题。当然，我们是昨天更加深入的讨论这个问题。
There are many arguments on the part of conservative circles against women enjoying the rights that they should be enjoying.
在保守的圈子里面，他们有很多借口来说为什么女性不应该拥有相同的。
Yesterday we discussed that in some countries, conservative forces say this is our culture, this is our traditions, and we have to keep our traditions.
我昨天有人提问到这个问题，就是说有很多保守派会利用文化，就是说文化传统作为一个借口来让女性工作事情。
But we start from the perception that the fundamental thing for us is the rights of people and the equality between people.
但是我们明确的说明了，就是说我们认为最重要的东西是人权还有平等。
And if we have to change culture for this reason, then we should change culture.
对，如果你的传统文化跟比如说人权还有平等相违背的话，那当然就是这些传统文化必须被改变。
And if we need to change traditions, we must change traditions.
传统文化常常都在改变，所以我们当然我们需要改变。
Eleni mentioned yesterday that in the culture of some civilizations was slavery.
就像Elena举的例子一样，有些文化传统会允许这个蓄奴，那么我们当然是不同。
Not only in ancient times, but even in recent colonial times, they were taking the black slaves from Africa to take them to Europe and to the United States.
不仅是在古代发生的，是近代的时候，有很多的这个欧洲殖民者，他们会从非洲来这个进口黑奴。
We reject this kind of culture and we reject this kind of arguments.
所以我们当然就是反对那这种类型的这种文化，还有这种类型的这种。
We start on the basis of principles which are equality between people and equality between nations.
当然的，就是说，我们认为世界上的一切的这些文化，它都必须基于这个人人平等，还有这个各民族之间平等的这样的一种基础。
What is happening in some countries which apply the Islamic law to suppress violently women's rights is simply a tragedy for present-day civilization and present-day humanity, and something that we must fight against.
很多这些，例如说伊斯兰国家里面有很多这些把女性的这些权利，他们剥夺的这些文化传统，那这些当然是我们对我们全人类来说都是一种悲剧。那我们是一定要去与之对抗。
And some people use the argument that was mentioned that if women go to work, then there would be a population decline.
有些人也用这样的借口，就是说，如果女性都去受了高等教育，那么就会导致我们的这个少子化。
So what is the problem with population decline?
那么到底少子化有什么问题呢
I mean, the decline of population is not an aim in itself.
那么因为毕竟少子化本身并不是一个问题。
The main thing is for women and for men, but fundamentally for women, to have the freedom to decide if they want to have children, how many children they want to have, and when to have them.
因为这里最主要的问题就是说，女性跟男性都应该有权利去决定说，自己要不要有小孩，想要多少个小孩。
And if there are some governments which want to facilitate the increase of population, which, to be honest, usually this is for reactionary reason for nationalism and competition with other nations. But leaving this aside, if a government wants to help to increase the population, they can assist women to create better conditions for women to be able to bear children.
那么，如果有一些国家，国家的政府，他们想要去增加人口，在很多情况下，这个原因，他们背后的目的都是相当反动，例如说想要去跟其他的国家进行这种竞争等等这种原因。那如果他们真的想要就是说帮助女性去增加人口的话，那么他们能做的最简单的一个做法就是去给女性提供更好的他们的生活条件，或者说让他们可以更容易的去生孩子这样的条件。
For example, give them extensive maternity leaves and give them extensive leaves from their jobs to be able to bring up their children in the initial stages.
比如说，应该要让女性拥有就是这个很长，就是说足够时间的这个产假，她们能够就是生育以后可以有很长的时间可以去养育自己的小孩。
But give such leave not only to women, to men as well.
但是这个产假也不应该只有女性拥有，同时他们的这个男性，也是父亲也应该拥有。
So that men and women share the responsibility of bringing up the child in the very initial stages of the first, let's say, 2 to 3 years of their life.
这样的这个养育的工作才不会被显得像是就是只有女性该去做这件事，而是这个父亲母亲都应该共同的去分摊这些工作，要不然在最早的这个小孩出生的2-3年也应该是这样。
And at the same time as the parents have take leaves from the job to raise the child, their jobs should be guaranteed.
那么同时呢，他们如果他们的这个双薪去请假去养育他们的小孩，那他们的工作也不应该被裁撤。
And there should be state benefits for people who bear children. They should be assisted financially by the state.
然后呢，这个国家应该担负他们在这段时间的一些经济的来源。
And there should be nurseries for the little children and even babies to go when the parents are at work.
然后应该也有，就是说，当他们的双亲终于要回去工作的时候，应该要有地方给让这些小孩可以去，就是说，就简单说就是安心班了，因为有安心班。
So why don't governments take such measures to encourage people to bear more children?
所以为什么有很多的这些国家政府不是
Because they cost money.
就是因为它会造成成本。
And therefore they prefer, instead of the governments covering the cost of giving birth to children and raising children, they put the woman in the position to bear all the responsibility.
所以他们是希望就是说，比起就是说国家去做这些事情，他们会更希望就是说，一些统治者大家都更希望女性自己去承担这些责任。
And this is extremely unfair for women, and this is very divisive because it puts women against men and causes a kind of a competition between the sexes.
这个当然就非常的对女性非常的不公平，而且造成的就是男女之间的会有这样的分离和对立。
But this also suits the system very well because it makes people not understand who the real enemy is, which is the governments, the state, the rich capitalist people, and not the husband or the relations between the sexes.
但是这样的对立呢，反而又让又对这个体制有好处，因为它让很多的这个人们会造成就是说模糊焦点，没有办法看到说真正的问题来源是这些拥有权利的人，或者拥有财富的人，而是会认为说我们现在敌人就是不同的性别。
The second question is about the universal basic income.
第二个问题关于
We have to start by saying that this is impossible under capitalism.
我们必须说从原则上来说，我认为就是说这种基本无条件收入在资本主义上是这样子的。
And I mean absolutely impossible.
而且我要说明就是说，我要强调是绝对。
There are perhaps half the population of the planet. They live on $2 or $3 a day.
全世界有大概
$2 or $3 a day. nearly 50% of the
全世界有大概一半的人口，他们的每天的这个收入在2到3美元以上。
And at the same time, you have the rich industrial countries in which workers are paid, for example, in the US, they are paid $15 an hour.
相反，在某一些就是说有富有的国家，例如在美国，时薪则可以包含这可以是大概15美元。
And then, of course, you have the high-ranking officials and the capitalists who earn millions.
当然，也有更加有富有的这些在阶级的这些官员，他们每天的这个，他每小时的这个收入就可以获得几百万。
This is impossible to cover under capitalism.
这种程度的这个区别是不可能，就是在分离的体制下面去把它这个平衡。
The capitalists in the major capitalist countries, they exploit their working class, but they exploit even more the working class in the poor countries.
所有的这些资产阶级国家，他们首先会剥削自己的人民，但他们同时会更加的去剥削别的国家的人。
This is how they make their profits.
这就是他们取得这种利润的方式。
But in a socialist society in the future, this is possible.
但是在一个社会主义的社会里，这是不可能发生的。
And it's something that we can aim at. We should aim at.
这是一个我们必须去废除的我们的目标是废除的一个东西。
In a socialist society, you will have not only more or less equality of wages on a national basis, but even on an international basis.
在一个社会主义的国家里，在一个社会主义的世界里，我们追求的是不仅在一个国家内部的薪资应该要平等，并且在国家与国家之间薪资也应该要平等。
Because the rich industrial states, they will invest in the poorer states and try to bring and raise the economy, but also the standard of living.
因为这些先进的这些国家呢，他们经济先进的这些国家应该要去把他们的这些资本投资进去这些落后的国家，然后让他们可以追上他们的程度。
But even if you take the European Union, not even in the European Union is there today equality between wages.
那甚至例如说，我们在这个欧盟里面也没有所谓的那种薪资的具体。
There are huge differences between countries in the Balkans that earn a wage of, let's say, 400 or 500 euros a month, to workers in the north of Europe who earn 4,000 to 5,000 a month. Not to mention the capitalists, of course, who again earn millions and billions.
比如说，在欧盟范围内，这个巴尔干这边的巴尔干地区的这些工人，他们可能每月的这个薪资是大概400到500欧元，但是在北欧的话，同样的这些工人，他们每月的薪资可能是4000、5000。我们当然就更不用提资本资产家他们的收入当然是更多。
Or the argument that if there is a UBI, which is also for women, and that this may encourage some women to leave their husbands. Well, if the relation is not good, then they should leave, and they should have the freedom to leave their husbands and get a divorce.
那么关于就是说，如果有 UBI， 那么很多的女性可能就会跟她的丈夫离婚这件事情。那么显然的，如果这个女性本来就跟她丈夫在一起不快乐，那当然呢。
So the main thing is not to force women to stay with their husband in a bad relationship, but the main thing is to enable women to escape from a bad relationship and not stay there for economic and financial reasons.
所以说，我们不应该让女性为了这个经济原因去跟他们的不好的这些丈夫在一起，而是应该 鼓励他们，就是说让他们有这个能力，就是变成经济独立，然后就可以这个跟他们的一些不好的关系。
Now, about his question on the impact of the rise of India,
关于这个印度兴起、印度崛起法的问题。
India is becoming an important element in the global balance of forces in the past few years.
印度在过去几年内变成了世界的范围内的国际政治里面比较重要的一个地方。
There is a new situation developing. The rates of growth of China are decreasing, but India is continuing to have high rates of growth.
目前的一个现象是说，中国的经济成长的速率正在变缓，那相对的，印度的成长速率呢一直是非常的高。
And this makes many strategies of capital in the West to hope to use India against the rise of China.
所以西方呢有很多这些策略的专家，他们会希望通过印度来去制衡中国。
Actually, what is happening is because the West is very much afraid that China will become the dominant power in the next years, they try to encourage India to grow faster.
事实上，发生的事情是说，因为西方很惧怕中国的兴起，所以他们会去鼓励印度的这个发展。
The West needs China at the present time, both as a market but also as a factory for its own products.
目前西方对于中国来说，他们需要中国是作为他们的市场，然后他们的商品也可以卖到中国。还有另外一部分就是说，作为一个工厂，就是说他们的商品可以跟中国生产。
In other words, the West is using Chinese workers to produce the products of Western multinationals.
所以就是说，西方是在用中国的工厂来生产，就中国的工人来生产他们西方的这些国际厂。
Now they have a policy of trying to shift their production from China to other Asian countries, and India is one such important country.
目前他们的新的政策是说，想要把中国那边当地的这些生产转移到其他地方，而印度是其中一个非常重要的。
Because India now is the most popular country in the planet, it's bigger now than China, and therefore there is a labor force there to produce the goods that the West wants for its own multinational companies.
因为印度现在的人口其实已经超过中国，它是全世界人口最多的，当然就有这样的这个劳动力来去完成西方想要的这些市场。
So they try to develop closer relations with India, and they try to use India to create a division between China and India and inside BRICS.
所以呢，他们西方就非常的鼓励印度的发展，然后希望通过印度，希望去把印度跟中国之间产生摩擦冲突，然后让这个金砖五国的这个体制变得不稳定。
This policy has two problems.
他们的这个策略有两个问题。
The first problem is that India is very, very far behind China.
第一个问题在于说，印度目前来说跟中国之间的差距还是很大。
India has something like 1/5 or 1/6 of the GDP of China, so it's much less rich, much poorer.
所以就是说，印度目前的 GDP 总量对跟中国相比的话，大概是中国的1/5，所以这个差距还很大。
So it has a lot of ground to cover before it can really compete with China.
所以它要跟中国去竞争的话，还有比较长的一条路。
Which means decades. It will take decades for India to become, let's say, a first-rate power.
所以我们预估这个可能，这个时间可能差不多要10年左右，印度才会成为所谓的第一列，就是说第一顺位，就是说第一级别的国家。
So that's one problem. The second problem is what will happen when India becomes a superpower, let's say in 50 years from now.
第二个问题是说，我们来想，如果50年以后印度成为了一个世界强权，然后怎么样
being a capitalist country, it's going to be by definition imperialist, and it's going to also collide with the United States and Europe and Japan.
作为一个资产阶级的资本主义的一个强权，当然会走向帝国主义的路线，并且会与美国与日本发生冲突。
So this is not solving the problem of the West. This attempt to approach India and use it against China. It doesn't solve the problem.
所以这种试图培养这个印度来去制衡中国的这个问题，其实并没有解决西方想要的问题。
But it delays the process of the West losing ground to China, and it makes them hope that something will happen and that they will survive as much as possible as the dominant force on the planet.
不过它的可能好处就是说，可能可以拖迟这个中国崛起的速度，然后可以西方同时希望就是说可以利用这种矛盾跟混乱，从中来获得一些策略上的好处，那么他们可以继续维持他们的这个霸权地位。
So it doesn't solve the problem of the decline of capitalism and of the decline of the U.S. imperialism.
对，这没有办法解决，就是说资本主义的整体的衰落问题，还有就是美国特定的美国这个国家的衰落的问题。
But it also gives us an idea of how the world will be a picture of the world in the next decades when we shall have not one center of power on the planet, but at least three important blocks.
但是这显然就是暗示了我们在接下来的10年以后可能会看到的世界上的这个势力的分布，可能会是一个3级的分布。
And just to end, this is going to be a very unstable factor for world development because of the increased competition between different sections of the planet.
显然呢，就是说，如果你的这个世界是更加多级的，就是说权力的中心越来越分散、越来越多的话，那显然就会更加的不稳定。
And the only solution from our point of view is if the working class is able to intervene, break this process, and create socialist societies internationally.
我们认为，要能解决这个当中的不稳定的这些可能发生的这些矛盾或战争的话，那我们觉得，我们不用这个立场来说，最有办法解决的办法就是工人应该要这个团结起来产生一场革命来推翻目前的这个制度。
好，我这里有几个问题，因为这个线上的参与者不方便就是开麦，所以就请我代问。第一个问题是，这个问题比较像是我等一下来问我的啊。但是还是说，就问一下说，近期在中国，尤其是疫情后，都有发生这个罢工跟工人的运动。那么我们如何去评价这些疫情后发生的工人运动
First question is after the COVID, after the event, there has been several labor uprisings. What do you think of?
那第二个问题就跟 Angel 刚刚的这个主讲是比较有关联的，是怎么样子去看待中国在非洲以及缅甸、东南亚这些地方的影响？
Countries like Myanmar.
好，那现场或线上的有人有问题？好，那个评论，你社恐吗？
我很理。
因为我最近在一些就是媒体上有看到，就是关于中国是否陷入中等收入陷阱的问题。
So the question is, it recently saw example that what does China might have been trapped with.
然后就是因为可能是我演算法可能 主要都是看衰中国，就是它可能会步入那个中南美洲那时候的状况，但是我就很疑惑，就是如果真的是照着这样发展，那真的中国真的未来可能真的会超越美国还是怎样？
So he says that he's very unsure whether this is true or not, and whether China actually be able to surpass the US or will this somehow fall forward to the travel or travel market behind China.
我大概是这样。
好，我觉得我们还可以再收集一个问题，我到底要不要发言？看你好像来，欢迎。
我想问一下，那如果在现在像是资本家上层阶级所订立出来的规则跟这个世界资本主义的运作方式下，社会主义是有办法和平，然后不造成伤害，像是什么基本人权的伤害下成功吗？
The question is, under the current system, it's possible to use socialism without any violent takeover and without causing too much pain.
好，那我这个做个发言好了，就是说，刚刚第一个问题是关于疫情后的中国工人的一些在中国内部发生的一些运动的状况。好，你要先发吗？那其实自从就是白纸运动，我们的定性其实跟台湾许多的左翼是不太一样的，这个我们必须澄清。这也是为什么我会称白纸运动为白纸运动，我们并不会称白纸革命。这个跟很多的，就是一些自由派或者台湾的自由派或者是左翼的定性。
The first point is that we capture what other
因为根据我们的分析，其实白纸运动它的主要的目的，其实还是要回归到疫情前的正常生活，而不是意图要去推翻中国共产党。那许多台湾的左翼会过度夸大这场运动，把他们连接到对于中国共产党的反对，或者是对于中国共产党政权的挑战。但是在运动里面，我们看不到这样子的特征，因为我们看到绝大多数的口号，事实上它都是连接到怎么样子去回归到正常的生活，怎么样子去回归到一般性的生活。但是它确实引起了一些后续的效应，比如说我们可以看到在更之后的重庆的这个药厂的工人的抗争。那他们展现了一些类似的特征，就是说中国的工人在没有正规组织、没有正规组织化的前提之下，工人呢能展现出一个巨大的抗争的动能。但是这种抗争的动能其实相对的是比较零散的，因为中国的工人没有办法在中国共产党底下自由的组建工会，或者是透过组织集会上面的一些自由，而是会受到一些警察的打压。然后关于那个中国对于非洲跟缅甸的问题，我专注在缅甸讲一下。 其实，在缅甸爆发政变的时候，这个俄罗斯跟中国还有美国对于缅甸军事政变的态度是完全不一样的。这个美国是美国是当然就是提出了带着西方集团做了很多的制裁这个缅甸军政府，而我们看到的是俄罗斯则是提供了很多武器给缅甸军政府。但是对于中国来讲，中国的角色则是怎么样子我们看到的是中国怎么样子去维系这个跟缅甸军政府的经济协议。比如说这个，我们举一些实际的例子哦，比如说这个在真正2021年的政变爆发了以后，中国是在这个就是逆风，我们就说用台湾的词汇来讲，在逆风的前提之下，继续去跟军政府签订所谓的蓝莓应该叫做蓝莓河还是蓝莓河经济合作协议，就是一个缅甸过去跟这个中国所牵涉的一个经济的合作。然后就是这个当时的中国的这个驻东协大使这个邓锡军也提到说，美国口头上奉行多边主义，去这个支持去口头上去支持多边主义来制裁这个缅甸，实际上是在拉帮结派来掠夺我们说东协，或者是来占领在东南亚抢地盘的。那但是这背后都还是离不开帝国主义就是帝国主义冲突的逻辑。因为对于中国来讲，能拉拢到缅甸的话，那中国就能突破这个美国在马六甲海峡所设下的封锁线，也就是说，它可以打通“一带一路”。然后中国就可以在“一带一路”的这个战略之下，去将昆明连接到曼德勒、仰光，或者是皎漂港，我不知道这怎么翻译，皎漂港这些东南亚的各个东南亚的大据点跟城市。然后这样子的中缅和经济合作走廊会长达1700公里。对，所以就是说，后续其实也有发现，也有很多就是证据证明说，就是美国试图去制裁，比如说军政府所开设的这个能源公司或者是珠宝公司，但是这些珠宝公司跟能源公司进一步的将订单转移到这个就是这些军政府的公司啊，进一步的将订单转移到中国那边去，或是由中国来出资继续的支持这些缅甸军政府所开设的这些公司。好，那我就针对这几个问题先做一个比较初步的回答，因为时间上的关系，我也没办法每一个问题，毕竟我也不是讲者，我没有办法很深入的去讲，就是做一个简短的发言这样子。好，那因为我们问题应该是已经4个了，所以就请这个 Andrews 来帮我们做一个回答。
I don't want to add much to what Frank has said about the questions that he answered.
就是刚才周方已经讲的那些东西，我就不在上面再多赘述一些。
But in relation to the movements in China, and particularly the movements of the youth, I want to agree that it's wrong to call them revolutions, as sections of the left have done. This is an exaggeration.
但是我想要同意，就是周方刚才说的，就是说白纸运动，有些人会把它，有些左派会太容易的把中国那边发生的那些群众性运动定性为这种革命性运动，我觉得这是有点夸张。
But of course, the white paper movement, as well as the laying flat movement, are very important.
但是我仍然认为，就白纸运动还有这种躺平的运动呢，都有他们一定的这个重要性。
Because they show the beginnings of stirrings inside the Chinese youth that have a kind of a critical approach to the Communist Party authorities.
要所展现的就是说，中国的青年人开始对这个他们的这个中共政权有一定的这种批判性。
And also, of course, the fact that the Chinese economy is slowing down, and for the first time in many years, there is youth unemployment. This is a factor that will intensify these processes.
当然，中国经济的减速，还有这个中国跟这么多年以后突然有了这种青年失业的现象，都会加重我目前这个趋势。
So it's important to see the processes that are in development, but at the same time, we always need to have a sense of balance.
所以我们当然必须正视这些现象，但我们同时也应该把它放在一个大局的思考。
At some stage, the Chinese society is going to explode because there is no dictatorship that lasted forever in history.
在某个时候，中国一定会爆发巨大的革命，因为不可能有任何在历史上从来没有一个这种独裁政府是永远的。
But it's impossible to predict the timing of such a development.
但目前为止，我们没有办法去预测说这个事情到什么时候会发生。
The key factor is if, when this development takes place, there will be socialist forces on an international plane which can provide a socialist perspective to the Chinese masses.
这里的问题在于说，当这种革命性的事件真的发生的时候，我们有没有足够的国际上的或者是国际上的这种国际势力，有没有足够的这样的势力，可以对当时正在进行革命的中国群众呢，去给他们足够的这些想法还有指引。
The Chinese working class is the strongest working class on the planet today.
目前为止的中国工人是全世界最强大的一个工人阶级。
So its power is invincible.
所以它的力量也将会是全世界最强。
Not only if it has a direction and it knows what it wants to aim for.
但是他们这种力量必须来自于说他们自己知道自己有这个力量，并且知道怎么使用这种力量。
Under some conditions, an explosion in China could lead to civil war and struggles between different sections of society.
在某些情况下，中国内部如果发生革命性事件的话，它的结果也有可能是产生像比如说内战，然后反正说中国各社会的各阶层或者说各地区之间的这个。
Now this discussion about the medium income trap and whether the policies followed by the West and by the US in particular will lead to a trap for China that it can never develop into the dominant power on the planet.
所谓的中等收入陷阱的这个问题，就是在问说，西方因为现在开始对中国的经济产生了做了一系列这种措施，那么是否中国会因此没有办法发展到一个相当高的这种经济的这种先进的程度？ 而会导致说它没有办法成为一个这种世界的决定性的力量。
The point which the comrade made that this is, we always have to worry about whether this is scientific analysis, serious economic analysis, or just propaganda is very valid.
So 这个同志刚才也说了，就是说我们不是很非常确定这当中到底多大程度上是，就是说真实的经济学的这种预测，多大程度上是某些政治势力他们做出的宣传，这我们其实本身也这是非常正确的，确实需要我们去小心这当中的区分。
We live in a period in which it is extremely difficult to find serious bourgeois press or serious publications by the capitalists which will give an objective approach to this issue. It's propaganda.
就是我很可惜的，或者说就是说自然，在我们当前的这个时代，很难去找到就是说资产阶级的这种他们的出版物，来非常客观的去讲这个问题。
This is the case in relation to the war in Ukraine, but this is also the case in relation to the competition with China.
这种情况，这种客观事实的这种宣法，目前是在乌克兰战争，在乌俄战争上也很明显，在中国问题上也很明显。
So we have to have in mind these possibilities. We have to follow this kind of arguments, but it's very difficult to see how they can completely stop the gradual development of China into the strongest economy on the planet.
所以我们当然是必须继续的去追踪他们这样的讨论，然后他们的这种对话，还有他们的研究。但是我就是说，按照说，我们认为很难去预测，很难去看出来说，他们要怎么完全阻挡中国的经济不再继续发展，成为一个世界上的一个重要的这个商权。
In the past few years, there were discussions, debates in the capitalist press in the West about the new epoch of deglobalization and about the period of decoupling.
在过去几年呢，有许多的这种像这些他们会在讨论说全世界在反全球化或者说脱钩的这些过程。
And also some left organizations, they kind of hastily declared the end of globalization and that decoupling would take something like some absolute form, that all the Western companies would leave China and they would go back to the US or somewhere else. And we said, this is not balanced.
所以有一些左翼组织就导致有一些左翼组织就很快的，就是说我们认为全球化的结束，所有的这个脱钩一定会非常的脱钩会变成一个非常常见的情况，例如什么中国的西方公司全部会撤出中国，那但是我们自己是认为说这个是有一点失衡的，有点不太客观。
So actually, in the past couple of years, we haven't seen deglobalization. We haven't seen an end to globalization, but we have seen an increase in international trade, and especially trade between China and the United States.
在过去几年里，我们看到并不是说这个全球化的消退，相反的，这种全球的贸易量反而是在增加的，甚至是中国跟美国之间的贸易量。
And also, this idea of deglobalization and of decoupling created rifts, clashes inside the Western forces, the Western camp.
甚至这种所谓的非反全球化的这个说法，还是在西方阵营内部产生了一些摩擦。
Both Germany and France clearly took open positions, and they actually did this in visits to China, that they are against deglobalization and that they are against decoupling.
就是说，德国跟法国都很明确的，就是说他们的政府首脑都很明确的 在访问中国的时候说明了他们并不同意反全球化这个事。
And actually, the United States has enforced to state publicly that we no longer support decoupling, but we support de-risking. I'm not sure if these terms are clear to everybody what it means, but they are lowering the tones in relation to their conflict with China.
所以老师说，美国政府也跑出来说，不得不跑出来说，就是说，他们出来声明说，我们并不再支持说脱钩，但是我们支持的是所谓的去风险，就是说我们要来分担风险。
I could say a lot about these things, but I would just point to the recent visit by Henry Kissinger to China. I don't know how many of you have noticed.
我不会，我觉得不用，我可以在这个议题上面多说一点，但是我觉得大家需要注意到最近那个基辛格跑去中国。
Kissinger is a very important personality in the United States, and the fact that he visited China is an indication that the United States doesn't want to polarize issues too much. But they will need to find some kind of a compromise with China.
比如说，基辛格当然是美国政坛一个非常重要的人物，那么他去中国，算是代表说，美国大概是不想要继续在此化跟中国的关系，但是他们有没有能力去找到一个就是所谓的妥协的程度，那我们也不是非常确定。
We think that it's impossible for the West and China to just separate their economies in the way that used to be the case before the first Cold War, when the Soviet economy and its satellites were completely cut off from the Western economies. We think that's impossible.
我觉得就是说，应该是不有可能在新的这个时代，就是说在我们现在这个时代发展成说，西方跟中国的圈子的这个经济完全就是分开，就像以前当年那个冷战时候。
Because it will lead to the collapse of both sides economically.
因为它这样的结果应该是会导致两方的经济都没有办法正常运行下去，都会崩溃。
The Western powers have also tried to isolate China and Russia from particularly using the Ukraine war, isolating China and Russia from, let's say, the majority of the countries in the planet.
那在之前这个俄罗斯就是说侵略乌克兰的时候，西方曾经想要用这个就利用这个机会去让中国跟俄罗斯的这个经济完全跟全世界孤立。
But they have not been successful in that.
但是这一次他们完全没有成功。
And there is a very basic explanation for this.
但是这个其中有一个非常简单的解释。
Not only the people of Asia, of Africa, and of Latin America, but also the governments in Asia, Latin America, the majority, they remember the role of colonialism and imperialism in exploiting their countries. So they're very suspicious of the West, and that's why they're not ready to take the side of the United States and the West.
因为全世界大多数的那些，例如说亚洲啊、非洲还有拉丁美洲的这些国家，他们很多都仍然记得，就是说西方对他们进行的帝国主义侵略的历史，所以他们当然在这个情况下，他们很难去就是说去支持西方的这个立场。
So it is not easy to isolate China from the rest of the planet, and in this way to push the economy down and block its development.
对西方要想要把中国完全孤立，然后让他们的经济完全停滞，是一件非常经济不可能的事情。
But still, we have to follow developments and processes and see to what extent this can be delayed.
但是我们当然呢，必须跟进一些事情的发展，然后来看，就是说中国的它的这个发展可以多大程度上可以延缓。
And the final question is whether revolution means violence, and violence means death and pain to the society.
这位问题是说，革命是否是就是说一定会就是造成大家的人类的这个大量的死亡，然后是需要。
Revolution is not identified with violence and with blood.
那我们这里必须强调，就是说一个革命它不一定它是流血。
Social revolution means that the masses of the people, they come to the scene of history and they change the process of history.
那么革命的意思是说社会革命的意思是说，就是人民团结起来，然后再走到这个历史的节点，然后在这个地方做出巨大的政治的行动来改变历史。
And we have some very good examples.
那我们有一些好的例子。
The Russian Revolution of 1917 October was bloodless. There was no bloodshed.
比如说，在2017年的时候，这个俄罗斯的革命其实是没有1917的2017年，对。
There was blood afterwards. When the forces of the West, they intervened to support their supporters inside the Soviet Union to fight against the Bolshevik government.
之后因为西方的很多势力开始，就是说帝国主义势力开始去介入这个俄罗斯革命，所以就导致了后来有发生非常血腥的内战。
We can mention some other major revolutionary developments in the recent history. Let's take, for example, France 1968.
我们还可以看到世界上最近更加新的一些革命性的活动，比如说法国的这个五月风暴。
France 1968 was the biggest youth movement in history, but also the biggest general strike in history.
就是说，1968年的法国的五月风暴呢，是法国历史上最大的一场学生运动，最大的一场罢工。
It was bloodless.
完全没有发生这个暴力。
If the French masses had a clear idea of what they wanted, they could take power without any blood.
所以说，法国的群众如果他们想要的话，完全可以夺权，不需要产生流血。
We could also use the example of the Portuguese Revolution in 1974.
还有另外一个例子就是这个1974年的这个葡萄牙的革命。
And actually, if the revolution has the support of huge sections of the population, then it's going to be bloodless because the power is so much in favor of the people that nobody dares to really fight them back.
事实上，当一个革命的形式是非常的，就是说压倒性质，就是说绝大多数的人民都支持这个革命，这个时候这个革命会更加倾向于是就是不流血、不暴力。
So if you have strong left revolutionary socialist political forces and the objective conditions push the masses into a revolutionary situation, then they can change society without violence and without blood.
所以我们如果有足够强大的这个国力的势力，能够让绝大多数的人都加入一个革命的话，那我们就更有可能这个机会来完成，就是说改变社会，而不同时不造成这种流血。
But if the masses have no direction and no leadership, then even if their struggle is heroic, they cannot win. On the contrary, they can pay with many deaths and many victims the fact that they revolted against the regime.
相反的，如果这些群众他们没有非常好的这个指引，然后行为，那么他们有可能虽然非常的英勇，他们去对抗一个政权，但是结果却必须付上很多的生命。
We see this happening in Iran today.
一个例子就是现在的伊朗。
The regime is executing people who were leading the struggles against the regime in the past year.
现在的伊朗政权正在就是秋后算账，正在追杀之前曾经参加过去年的一些起义的这个人。
And we have seen it in the Arab revolutions of 2011, 2012.
可以看到就是2011年、2012年的这个阿拉伯之春的情况。
In Tunisia, Egypt, Libya and Syria.
还有突尼西亚、埃及、利比亚，还有这个叙利亚。
The result was civil war in Libya and Syria.
这个当时的这些起义的结果是，就是说，例如说在利比亚还有这个叙利亚发生内战，
Hundreds of thousands of dead people and millions of refugees.
成千上万人就去世了，然后还有很多人成为了难民。
So if we are able to build strong left revolutionary forces, then we can have a peaceful transformation.
所以我们希望是通过建设一个强大的一个左翼的革命力量，来完成一个和平的这个夺选
with little violence.
然后有可能不能完全就是避免这个暴力。
But if the political forces are weak, then it's going to be bloodshed.
但如果我们的这个政治领导力是非常弱小的话，那非常有可能会
And that's why we have to build our forces in time to prepare for the events in the future.
这就是为什么我必须在真正发生这些暴动性，就是说这种历史的节点的事件之前，我们必须一定要准备好。
好，那因为我们到5点吧，我们到5点，所以剩下的时间就22分钟，我们就用作自由交流。然后这个等到5点我们就休息，然后休息1个小时，然后6点记得大家要回来，然后我们再继续进行最后一个场次。
那